Now we have understood that data validation restricts entries that are supposed to be done in a particular cell or a range of cells. Now, how many types of data validations do we have? Let's move to this particular worksheet and start working out practically. So how do you access data validation? The shortcut key, which I haven't put here, is, I'll just type it here, Alt plus D plus L. So that's the shortcut for data validation. If you wanted to access that feature very fast, okay? If you don't do this, then you have to move over to your data tab. You see this ribbon here. On the ribbon, you move until you locate the data tab. Under the data tools, you will see something called data validation. Depending on the version that you're running, some earlier versions will have the complete word data validation. So I just click in this icon. This opens the data validation dialog box, okay? So there's a lot of things we can do with this dialog box. Right now, we are sitting in the settings tab. We also have the input message tab, and we also have the error alert tab. So how do we use these different tabs? Let us explore what is in the settings tab. You see under here we have a data validation criteria. Right now in the cell that I've selected, I can allow, or it allows, entry of any value. Any value can be entered in the cell. That is the default behavior. When I click in the drop down, I'll see I have the any value, which is always the default whole number option. I have the decimal, I have the time. You can also restrict time. Then we also have a custom option. So this custom option is kind of more advanced because it requires you use a logical test. You write a custom formula. Once it evaluates either true or a false, then you will apply the data validation of your choice. Now let us work out the whole number example. Okay, I actually close this one off and go through this data set that we have here. We have the order IDs, the items that have been ordered, the order date, and the quantities that were ordered. Now, if this is a table that you'd like to share with colleagues so that they can input the order IDs and the items, you can run a data validation here. For example, set up a data validation rule that limits data entry into the order ID column to 4 digits between 1,000 and 9,999, okay? This is what we're going to be doing. I will use our first option, which is whole number. So I'll highlight this particular range of cells, or I can actually start from only one cell, or I can remove everything that we have right here so that we can rework it out, okay? So I highlight the cells where I want to implement the data validation. That's the first step. And on your keyboard, you press Alt-DL. That's the combination, okay? If you don't do that, after highlighting your cells, you navigate on your ribbon and locate the data tab, come over to data validation. This will also still give you this dialog box. So I'll come here and say allow whole number, okay? You can choose which option are you interested in. Our criteria is very clear. We want numbers between 1,000 and 9,999, okay? Let me punch here something that is greater than 4 numbers. I say 1,055. So when I hit enter key on the keyboard, you can see I get this particular error message here. It says the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions that is defined for this cell. However, you can customize this particular message. I'm going to be showing you how you can customize the message that the user will see if they make a mistake. Okay, so I can cancel out here and type in another number. Let me say 1,001. These are 4 numbers. This ID will accept. Let me punch in another one. I'll say 11,000. This one will not accept, and I'll be denied entry. I can retry. So when I click retry, it puts me into audit mode or edit mode. I can actually input the number that will be allowed, which is supposed to be 4 characters. I go 1,002, enter. This is also exceeding 4 numbers. So I retry. I'll put in 1,002. I'll just remove 10 and then enter. This one will allow. So that is restricting whole numbers. We can also customize the error alerts that a user will see, and we can also customize the input message. Let me just put something here like a comment. I right mouse click and edit or add a new comment or a note. And then I will say, please add IDs that are 4 digits long. This is like just a small comment to let the user understand the data restriction that has been applied here. So when I point to the header here or to the order ID, I'll see the restriction or the requirement. Please add IDs that are 4 digits long. That's one way of alerting a user to make sure they give you correct information. Or we can actually add a comment that looks like this here, what's called an input message. So how do we do that? Okay, I'll actually highlight this range where we have our data validation. Go back to the data validation dialog box. We still have our whole number between 1,000 and 9,999. Now we go to the input message. We can customize what we want to show up here. Show the input message when a cell is selected. So when you select a particular cell, like for our first one, we added a comment or a note. But this one is something that a user will see if they click or if they point in any of the cells before they input anything. I can just give it a title. So we may call it order ID just as an example. And the input message will be, please enter an ID that is 4 digits long between 1,000 and 9,999. Okay, that's the small message that we want the user to see. I'll say okay. Now when I point in any of these cells, when I'm active in any of these cells where the data validation is happening, for example in this particular cell, you see this one pops up. This is like an input message to avoid the user making that mistake. These are all avenues to make sure that they give you correct data. Remember, you have already restricted, but to make sure that you relieve them of that particular single click they will get when they punch in a number that doesn't conform, then you show them this particular message. Order ID, please enter an ID that is 4 digits long. If you don't want this particular header here, you can highlight and edit this data validation. I'll go back to data validation. I remove the title so that we only get the message. So when I click in the cell, I see this particular notification that please enter an ID that is 4 digits long between 1,000 and 99. This is enough to let the user avoid making that mistake. Now, how about the errors? Because if they make an error, for example, if I punch in something that is too long, I get an error. In your version, depending on the version that you're running, you may see an error that looks like this. But for me, because I'm running Office 365, this has been amended. This is how it looks like in the newer version. So it comes like this. You see? But for your case, you might have a picture that looks like this. You try it on your side and let us know. Let me actually activate the cursor so that you can see where I'm pointing. Let me activate the cursor highlighter. Okay, so you can see where my cursor is. You see, this picture here is what you might have depending on the version. But because I'm running Office 365, I have this particular error alert. I have an option of retrying and canceling. But for you, you have 3 buttons: retry, cancel, and help. Now let us go through the number of error alerts. We have in total 3 error alert types, and we understand which error does what and which one you should be implementing if you are seriously in need of collecting correct data. Okay, we have the default one, which is the stop, which is the default. You see this symbol here with an X, with a red X. So this is the default one, which is the stop. Please stop. You have made a mistake. Stop. What does it do? This is very strict. When you see that error type, stop. You have made an error. It simply means you can't reverse that particular. You can't reverse. This has been configured to alert you that you cannot proceed. Please stop punching in those 5 digits. We said you punch in 10 digits. That's the restriction that is happening here. We said pick from the drop-down list. For you, you're trying to punch in something. So you get this error. The default one is very strict. It prevents users from entering invalid data. So you only have to click retry to type a different value, or you cancel or remove the entry. And we've done that, you've seen in our previous example. So when I punched in something wrong here that's not allowed, you saw what happened here. I got this error. So I have a chance of retrying or canceling. So when I cancel, everything goes away, and then I can punch in the correct one. Or if I do not use the cancel button, I say retry. So when I say retry, it takes me into the edit mode. I can now punch in the correct ID, which is 4 digits long, between 1000 and 9999. Okay. So that's the first error alert that you will see. It is very strict. Once you see that error alert, it means it cannot give you any more chance of either accepting the entry you have made. You get? So the next one is the one that can give you a chance of accepting the entry that you have just made. Okay? This one is like a warning. It warns you with this exclamation mark here. Okay, how do you configure all these? I'm coming in my next example. I'll show you how do you configure all these error alerts. So this is a warning alert type. This is how it shows in your version. I don't know how it will show in my version when I configure this one. So what happens here is, for the previous one, we have a button for retrying, canceling, or help. We can get help, we can cancel or retry. But for this one, we have extra buttons. We can either continue, or we say no, cancel, or we can seek for help. Extra button here added. Okay. Now, if you continue, if you say yes, it will allow you, or it will accept that value that you'll have punched in. So you can see the disadvantage here. If you set your alert or your error alerts to a warning, it means that members can input or punch in wrong, invalid data, which is wrong. So I think we should be sticking to the stop error alert. But if we do a warning, it means that members can either say no, so that they can input a correct or a valid entry, or they can say yes, and this one will accept. The what? Will be able to accept even that invalid entry. Okay, or they can actually cancel or seek help. So this one warns the user that you're trying to input an invalid data, but no problem, we can allow you input it, though it is invalid. So it depends now on the user. So if you're setting up your worksheets that you're sharing with colleagues in the field to collect data, don't use this type of error alert. But of course, by default, if you don't do anything, we are just showing you that this one also exists. But by default, once you set up a data validation, it will always default to the stop. Warning, it just warns you. I'm warning you, you're doing an invalid entry, but I can still accept it. I can still take it. You see? Now, we also have this one, which is called the information. This error alert here, which is called information. So this one just gives you information about the entry you're making. So it just gives you information, and you can actually customize the message that the user can see here. So this error alert will just warn a user, and it will have no effect. If they actually pressed OK, the value will be accepted. They will still give you a wrong entry. You get the idea? So let us see, how do we set up all these error alert messages. I'll go back to the whole number worksheet and try setting up this error message from here. So I'll highlight the cells that have data validation in them and go back to the data validation. Now we move to this tab here, which is the error alert. We have seen the input message and also the settings tab. Now we move to the error alert. The default one, the style is a stop with this particular icon. When the user enters invalid data, show this error alert. It is you who configures. By default, it is the stop. So I'll put a title here for this particular error alert. I'll tell this user that please enter a valid, okay, this is a long one, should be a message. I'll say valid ID. That is the title. I can put the error message here. I'll say, please enter a valid ID with 4 digits between 1000 and 9999. Okay, so this is the error that I want them to see, and the default one is stop. So when I say okay, I come back and input a wrong value here. Remember, I'm getting this screen tip here that tells me what I'm supposed to be punching. I assume I haven't seen this one. I go ahead and punch in something bigger. Okay, enter. What do I see here? I see valid ID. Please enter a valid ID with 4 digits between 1000 and 999, blah, 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 blah. So you can customize what the user will see. And here they have no chance of either allowing the entry that you've made. The only chance is to retry. They can retry or they can cancel. Okay. How about the other one we saw? The warning. Let us set the warning this time. I'll go back to the worksheet, highlight where we have our data validation, go back to the data validation. I'll just do Alt DL. That is the shortcut. And I can edit this one. I'll say, I don't know whether this title is very clear. Let me just say, avoid entering an invalid ID. Avoid entering an invalid ID. I've just edited the title, and now I'll change the style of the error alert to warning. I do that, and then I say, okay. So you can see even the icon changes here. Just warning, that exclamation mark. Just a warning. I say, okay. Now let's go back and input something wrong. I'll just input any number that's not allowed and enter on the keyboard. You see, this is what I get. I get a warning. Avoid entering an invalid ID. Please enter a valid ID with 4 digits between 1000, blah, blah, blah. So now they ask me, do you want to continue? Are you saying no, or are you canceling? So if someone sees this error, it's dependent on them. They can either say yes. So let us say yes and see what happens. I'll say yes. You see what happened here? This invalid ID has been accepted. This is wrong. This is wrong. Okay, let us go back and see what happens if we say no. So I'll just put in another wrong number. This one will give me the warning alert. So when I say no, it puts into edit mode. Now I can actually amend this number to a 4-digit number. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, enter. This one will allow. Okay, let us input another wrong value and enter. And then we say cancel. So once you cancel, everything goes away and you are able to restart punching in the values. Okay, so I think we have exhausted most of the things to do with the data validation tabs that we have, the settings, the input message, and the error alert. Now we can move to the next option that we have under the validation criteria. We have seen that we can restrict whole numbers. Now let's move forward to something else. Okay, what other options do we have under the validation criteria? We can do a list. Okay, so there's a lot that we can do with this data validation list, and this is the common usage. I've seen so many people who use data validation. They have been using this list data validation here. So all these other the whole number, the decimal, the date, text length, a few people I've seen in all my the people I've interacted with, a few people use these other options. So the most common here is the data validation list. I'll cancel out and then move to the next worksheet. Okay, list and the dates. So let's assume we are collecting data here. We are collecting data, and we are required to collect a department, the project start date, the district code, the project number, and then the project description. This is just for training purposes, but you can implement this data validation in any of your projects. I don't know what you'll be using it for. Okay, so when I point here, I can see that do not type anything here. Pick from the predefined list. So we want to provide a predefined list here for the department. Let me check. Someone has dropped a comment. or someone has their hand up. Yes. Tom Omoding.
I wanted to ask you, why is it that those boxes there, they're having that red mark there up? What is the problem?
These red, are they triangles or whatever you're seeing in the corner here? It simply tells the user that there is a comment or a note that has been added. So how do you add this note? I'll come to this cell and show you how do we add the note. Okay, so you come to the cell where you want to add the note, right mouse click, and then you'll see an option here for adding a new note. I'll just say new note, and then it will show me the user who is interested in adding a note, and it shows you my name. I have the flexibility of removing my name so that I can just type in the comment I want to add or the note. So I'll say enter project details. Okay, enter project details. I can resize this box here, and I can take it in any position where I want it to show from. Okay, now if I actually clicked here, you'll see it shows up here. You just hover over to the cell. You don't even need to click. But either way, whether you're clicked or you just pointing to that particular cell, it will show you enter project details. That's how you add the comment. Tom Omoding, can you confirm and give us signal to continue? Are you comfortable?
I, I have got you now.
Hmm?
I have got you.
Are you comfortable with the? Oh, okay, so these red triangles or whatever you're seeing, they should not scare you. So we wanted to use our data validation list here, and they are saying we should be picking from a drop down list. So how do we create a drop down list? Okay, so I'll highlight this range of cells and go back to the data validation. The shortcut key, I've given it to you, Alt DL. And in the validation criteria, I'll go for a list. So this one doesn't have the between. You can see the data tab is grayed out right here, but it activates the ignore blank and the in cell drop down. So we shall leave it to the default and come over to the source. So this source dialog box here, or this source box here, has a collapse icon here. So meaning you can use this collapse icon to point to a cell address. Remember, in our classes, I always tell you that don't do hard coding because things can change in the future. Things can change in the near future, and the near future could be tomorrow or in the next hour. So if it changes and you have hard coded in your source here, it becomes very hard. You have to go back and manually update. But when you have a list somewhere in another range, in a cell address, you just highlight that range. Okay, but let us do the hard coding first, and then we shall do the range later. So the department, I'll put IT, comma. So immediately after the comma, I put another department, which will be finance, comma. I'm just adding the source of that drop-down list because we have the validation criteria that we are using is validation list. We want to pick from a list. IT, finance, which other department? I'll say engineering. Which other department do you know that you might have? I'll say projects. I'll add another department that's just coming in my head randomly. I'll add another one which I'll call support. Which input message should I set up here? I'll come to the input message. I don't want the title. I'll just put the message here. Please pick from the list. Please pick from the list. You should find a way how you rephrase these particular sentences. Make sure they are short, precise, and they can guide the user. But for me, I am not good at doing that. Okay. I can also choose my error alert. I wanted to leave it to the default so that I don't give them any chance to give me wrong data. So I leave it to the stop, and I can put the message here. Please go back and pick from the list. Yeah, go back and pick from the list. That's what I've said. Okay, so I'll say okay, and there you go. When I come to this cell, I can see the screen tip here pops up, or a comment or a message, and it says please pick from the list. I want to define that order. I want to punch in anything here of my choice, and I will type in marketing. I just punch in marketing because I'm defining the order. I didn't even check the list that they provided. I enter. This one will deny. This one will fail. It says, please go back and pick from the list. Mhm. You see how this one is helpful if you want to collect correct data, because the cause of trouble, the cause of problems in any data analysis process is collecting incorrect data. If you have incorrect raw data, then your analysis will also yield invalid results, definitely. So make sure that when you're preparing your worksheets, they should be really configured to give you correct data so that you can remain with minor cleanups. We have classes on how to deal with cleaning up data. Of course, you cannot avoid working with data sets that come from various systems, and various systems work differently. So when it comes to Excel, sometimes you need to do a cleanup, so that you make it ready for analysis. The beauty is that in our course, we have two sessions that will actually dwell more on data cleaning. We have data cleaning and preparation using text functions, and we also have data cleaning and preparation using Power Query. So we see how Power Query automates that process. We have looked at how to set up all these messages. So I'm denied. I just retry. And when I retry and punch in IT, you see, immediately I start punching in IT, an item that is already part of the predefined list, it will pop up here. So when I enter key on the keyboard, this will be allowed. Okay. So it means that as you punch in the department here, the data validation will be looking through its records and trying to locate, do we have this particular record in our data restriction? If it is, then it will be allowed. Or if you actually wanted to enter something here, you pick from the drop down list. So I'll go for engineering. You can see this one allows. I'll go for finance. This one accepts. I'll go for IT again. This one accepts. So that's how it works. Okay. Now, let us look at some tricks here. If, and I've put some notes here, if there is an existing item in a cell and you put data validation, it's not going to remove that value. But it can be seen as an invalid data validation. Okay. So let us test that and see. What I'm going to be doing is to get rid of the data validation that we have here. So I remove everything. Okay. How do I remove data validation? I highlight and then Alt DL on the keyboard. And when this data validation dialog box opens, I clear all. So when I say clear all, have you seen what happened? Let's go back to the input message. There is nothing. Let's go back to the settings. There is nothing. Everything has been restored to the default. So this particular range of cells can allow any value. And then I can say, okay. Now everything has been removed. Assuming these values are already in the cells as we set up the data validation. So I highlight and come back to data validation. Now I go for a criteria of data validation list, and I can start giving my departments. So the departments that I'll give here will be HR. This time I'll give HR, comma, I'll give marketing, comma, I'll also give, let me give engineering, I'll also give accounts. So let's assume these are our departments. I say, okay, I want to show you something, okay? So we have implemented our data validation, but we already had values in the cells, okay? They will not be removed, but they are not recognized as valid data validation values. So how do we recognize that some values in other cells are invalid data validations? Yes, there is a method that you use. You'll actually click or highlight the cells and come back here to the data validation. This time you click in the drop down arrow here. So when you click here, it will pop up a number of options: clear validation circles, circle invalid data, and then the data validation itself. Now let us circle invalid data. I click this second option here. So why am I clicking this option? I want to double check. By the time I implemented the data validation, did we have any value in that cell? If it was there by the time I implemented the data validation, it will be circled. It will be circled with a red mark. So I choose this option. You see what has happened? Almost all these values were there. So it's only one cell whose value has been identified as a correct data validation list. That's the engineering, because we have the engineering as part of our data validation list here. Let us double check the departments we have here. It's only engineering which has turned out to be true. The rest are values that were already sitting in those cells as we implemented this data validation. So that's how you can double check. Sometimes they can give it to you as a test. So I can remove the circles, clear circles, they go away. Now I can actually pick from the correct list. Or I can actually leave the circles on and then I start correcting. Okay. I'll come to this department and choose marketing. Once I do that, the circle goes away. So I come to this cell and I choose the correct one. I'll go for accounts. The circling goes away. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show you on the data validation list, sometimes this list, if you hard code it and maybe that list grows, what happens? For example, you're going to be punching in the districts here. So we have created, let me get rid of this worksheet here. We have created a worksheet here that I have called the district, and I can go to any cell and punch in the districts of my choice. Yes, please help me, give me a list of districts. I'll say Kampala, Wakiso. Okay, so let us use these districts here as our drop-down list. And I want to show you something here. Just be attentive. I can change this one, district code, to the district name. Okay. I can change it to the district name. Okay. So we highlight here and go to data validation. And we choose the criteria as a list. And in the source, instead of actually hard coding in here our districts, we pick it from a predefined list somewhere. So I'll go to this worksheet. You can see the cell reference has been input for us, districts exclamation mark, because that is the worksheet name. And now I can highlight this range like that. And by default, it is absolute. It is locked. This is an absolute cell reference. And there's a reason why it does that. And then there's also a disadvantage to this kind of approach, especially when your list is going to grow. Okay. So I say, okay, immediately I do that, my district names will appear here. Okay. So my district names will appear from the drop down. I can go from Kono. Let me punch in something that I didn't. I go for Fort Portal. This one was not part of our list, and the default is always stop. Stop. The value of punching does not match. Stop. That's what is happening here. So I can retry and pick from the list. I can cancel and then pick from the list. I go from Kono. Now, assuming that, let me just pick Kampala. Assuming that this list in the future is going to be growing, what happens? The number of options you can use to play around to make sure that this list updates. Right now, we have how many districts? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 districts in the list. Now, if we added Fort Portal somewhere here in our list, let's add Fort Portal. Fort Portal. Let's also add another one. Okay. Now, let us double check in our list here if we have leader appearing here and Fort Portal. Let me go here and double check. We only have up to Kapchorwa. So what can we do? One of the trick that you can use here is we can see our range when we can actually go back to the data validation here that we use. You can see our range is stopping from here. So these two districts that we added cannot have a chance of appearing in this range because this is an absolute range and it only stops here. That's what we have. So when you add a new district here, one of the things you can do is to carry this district and put them in the middle. is to carry any new data and put them in the middle. How can you do that? You can either click here and add a column, a row, sorry, and insert a row. So when I insert a row here and I add a new district, let me call it Gulu. Let me just call it Gulu. So if I added the Gulu here in the middle, remember initially it was not part of our predefined list. Now when I go back to the districts here, let me double check if Gulu is sitting there right in our list. You see, it has now surfaced because we have added it in the middle. But photo and leader are not showing anywhere. Now, if we added something here and we wanted it to show up here, we can carry it into the middle. How do we carry? We can use the shift key on the keyboard. We hold the shift key and carry this record. You see, you carry it into the middle or anywhere you want. You hold the shift key, then you will see that green line moving through the cells. So when you're comfortable, the position, I want it here, you release. So once you release, the list will update. So Fort Portal is in the list. I also carry leader and put it somewhere. So this range is growing. I put it here. Now let's go back and see if we are able to get our districts updated. Yes, up to Captura. Because Captura was already there. So this range has been growing. That's one of the methods, but that's not a sustainable method. We want whenever we add a district, so you can see the range is growing here. You can grow this range manually. You can come to the data validation and grow it manually, because when I click here, you can see it ends here. If I wanted to grow it, I can say it's now on row number 12. I can edit this one and say row 100. Okay, so when I say row 100 and say okay, you see it has added even those cells that are blank. You see, so if you add something here, let's add a district here that was not initially with us. Which district? There's a lady who was mentioning her district. Can you tell us? I'm forgetting. But the districts in Rwanda, we wanted to hear those districts in Rwanda and Kenya, if you are joining from those countries, and Sudan. By the way, we always have people from Southern Sudan.
I've
Which
said
district can we add?
Kichukilo.
Ki
Kichukilo. Ki C-U.
Kichukilo. Eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kichu.
Ki. Yes.
That one,
Like
Kichukilo.
that.
That's where you are right now.
Yeah.
Someone from Southern Sudan. Do we have anyone to give us one of their districts? This is Kichukiro. So whenever we add a new district, we want it to update automatically here. So let us see if Kichukiro is part of us. Yes, Kichukiro has been added because we expanded the range. We expanded this range in our data validation. Sorry, someone wants to speak. We expanded this range in our data validation here to capture 100 rows. So anything that will be punched here within this range will be accepted. I've seen some people using this trick here. So what they do when they are at this level here inside the district worksheet, so they select the entire column. You see? So this one becomes $B, $B, $B. That's a range. That's an expandable range. So everything that will be sitting in that cell, in that column, will be considered to be part of your data validation. But again, you find you have column headers there. So sometimes even your column headers will be added as drop-down lists. So let us say okay. So there is a problem with this particular formula. Yes, because I clicked somewhere. So I remove this one and say equals districts exclamation mark $B. Click OK. So this one also allows. So anything that will be punched in the districts worksheet in column B will be able to be accepted. So let us punch something way down somewhere here. Okay, and we call it something. Let me say we call it anything. I don't know, ginger. So we call it ginger. Let us double check if we have it here in the list. I'll just click here I scroll. Yes, we have ginger. So regardless which position you give it or you put it, you will see the district appear here. Now, I've shown you one of the ways how you can update a list that grows. Now, the other efficient method, or the method that is used by pros like you, Excel advanced users like you use what is called a table. So we convert this one into an Excel table so that any record we add here, because we want to avoid highlighting the entire range, because when you highlight this entire range, Excel looks at all the cells up to the million cells, so it makes the file heavy. You have seen that it makes the file
Mm.
heavy, you see. So if you want to avoid that, you just create a small table so that the table will only grow to the records that are there. Do you know how to create an Excel table?
Yes.
Aha. Now, when we have an Excel table, it becomes very easy for
Mm.
our records to update. I'll actually give a column header here and I call it districts. Okay? So let us convert this one into a table. I'll just Control T on the keyboard. The range is highlighted and we get our create table dialog box, and I can confirm I have headers. Yes, I have headers, and I say okay. So this table is created. I give it a name. I'll call it districts or district list. Okay. So when I try to refer to any of these cells, equals you see what I get here. So this is the reference that for those people who attended our cell referencing classes, we did speak about how tables refer to themselves, how tables are used in formulas. They don't show the cell addresses. They tell you the table name and they give you the column that you're dealing with. Okay, so that's why you're seeing district list. That's the name of the table, and the column is districts. So this is the address that we are supposed to use inside our, but I think I'll leave this one for our advanced class that is coming up on Tuesday. I'll go back to this particular worksheet here. So we have dates here. Let us look at the date option. If, for example, what they are restricting us to punch here is the date that is greater than today, so that requires a formula. I wanted to show you the formula examples in our next class, so we can stick to a basic data validation here, which will be in between a specific date. So we can say the project dates here should be starting in the year 2022 and 2023. We can set that one up. So I come here and highlight the cells, go back to the data tab or data, I go to the data tools, data validation. I just do Alt DL, that is the shortcut. Okay. And instead of going with the list, I'll go with the date. So when I click the date option, this data tab, this data option is activated. And now it opens our comparison operators, between, not between, equal to, and we know how to use all these things here. So the example I'm gonna be giving you here is the start date. So this start date can either be sitting in a given cell or it can be hard coded here. So we can say the start date should be 1st of January 2022, and the end date should be 31st of December 2023. So we have declared the dates that should be punched in this particular column. Why do we do this? Sometimes you're collecting those date values. I don't know what you'll be collecting them for, but depending, sometimes you may want someone not to give you a weird date. I've seen data sets that they give us to clean, and you see someone is recording a year that is way, way back in 1900, and you ask yourself, how did they record this particular date? Sometimes they don't understand how the date, how Excel looks at dates. And this particular simple date record is very important. It can cost the entire company. It can cost you money if you can't work with dates properly, especially people in finance. You know very well that there is no transaction that is complete without a proper date. So if you can't deal with date values in Excel properly, you're bound to cost your company. I've seen people in trouble over these date things here. Okay, so ours here is very basic and simple, is to tell the project person that our project will start between, or we want to collect dates between 1st January 2022 up to 31st December 2023. If you give us any date outside that range, please, we shall not allow it. That's a way how you can make sure you're collecting correct data. It's not always a drop-down list. We can run data validation criteria without even having a drop-down list or a calendar. Sometimes you can implement a date picker here, but I see the date, I see this restriction here serving the purpose very well, because even in the date picker scenario, someone can pick a wrong date. Okay, I'll say okay, and we try this one out. 1st January 2018. What should we expect? Did I punch this one right? 1st January 2018. Enter. What do we expect? We got an error because, yes, someone is speaking.
We got an error because our criteria is the 1st January 2022 till 31st December 2023.
Exactly. So this one gives us an error, and the default, we looked at it, how to set this one up, the error alert type. So let us enter in another date. I'll say 2nd of January 2022. This one accepts. I'll go 5th of May 2023. This one accepts. Let me put in January 1st 2024. What happens? This one gives us an error. So you can see, using these simple tricks, when we go to a class called worksheet or worksheet setup and configuration, these are the simple things that make sense. These are the simple things that you show your boss how to do them, and they give you credit, or they even promote you if you know how to implement. Don't look at these things to be very basic and simple. These are the things that add up and form your solid foundation to understanding these tools. Okay, so I'm afraid that we have like 10 minutes to end this class, and we always use that particular few minutes to speak to each other. And I think we have explored. Let me check which options have remained with in terms of the criteria. Yes, we shall look at the time, text length, and then the custom in our next session. Okay, so this is the gist. This is where the gist of the matter is. This custom option here, because it uses formulas. So if you don't know how to write those logical formulas, you can't easily implement a sophisticated, complex data validation. All we have just looked at is like when you're beginning to set up data validation. Otherwise, I'm very grateful that you've been with us from when we started. Data validation is not very hard to implement. It's only hard if you don't practice, if you don't try. That's when it becomes very hard. Otherwise, it's one of the easiest, very most important thing that you should learn. Okay, that's data validation for us.
Thank you so much. The course was very interesting. It's the first time I joined online. Hope to join this course starting in October up to December. I think I was in advanced level, but I still see I'm still in the middle, not from scratch, but at advanced level, not. So the validation was very interesting. How can you protect and create your file for every data you need, even for personnel, even for your account. So it's very interesting. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I will inform my friend also to join for that coming training. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we can say good night to everyone and meet in our next session of on this particular class. And see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.